Whether you have been arrested for petty theft or for killing someone, it's a pretty standard rule of thumb that running away is gonna make it 100 times worse. Believe it or not, authorities don't take kindly to having convicts on the run, and if you try to make a break for it, well, you are definitely gonna pay the price. And it looks like despite this, some people, against all better judgment, still want to take their chances and bolt. Let's not wait any longer, cause today I've got a list of some of the most wild escapes from the courtroom. Let's get going. Starting us off at number 10, Rashad Hawkins. He may not be evil, but he certainly isn't innocent. Rashad Hawkins was attending child support court and was sentenced to serve some time due to his negligence and failure to pay. Now, instead of doing the time or paying what he owed, Rashad decided running was the route he was gonna take. Before he was even taken into custody, Hawkins managed to evade authorities by jumping over a second-story railing and fleeing the building before they could catch him. He stayed on the run for 20 days before eventually being caught and now faces charges of criminal trespassing, assault, and evading arrest. So all in all, he made it much worse on himself. Next up at number 9, Nickolaus Garrison. Arrested with several drug charges back in 2020, Nickolaus tried his luck and made a run while in the courthouse. Out of nowhere, he manages to escape the grasps of the sheriffs detaining him and bolts, pushing past others in the courthouse, with the sheriffs chasing after him close behind. Once outside of the chamber, he headed for the staircase, at which point the sheriff made a leaping dive down the stairs head first to try and catch him, ultimately breaking a few ribs and getting a concussion. Garrison managed to escape him and sprinted down the stairs as fast as he could. He was later found in a motel and arrested, and now faces far worse charges than his original 6 months. Next up at number 8, Mysterious Man. Now, unfortunately, I could not find the name of this escapee. All that I know is that he was from Washington, so if you know his name, leave it below in the comments. The mystery man took off his prison uniform while still in the courtroom, which I can only assume was empty. But if that was the case, why was a convict left alone in the first place? Whatever, that's not the point. Now, stripped of his uniform and semi-blending in with the civilians in the courthouse, he bolts straight out the front door, running past many witnesses. Although from what I can tell on the blurry footage, it does look like he was running barefoot, which, I don't know, that's kind of clue number 2 for me. People aren't generally running around barefoot in a courthouse with good news, but hey, what do I know? Anyways, he was found a few hours later and put back into custody, and like every other person on this list, things were much worse from there on out for him. And next up at number 7, Tanner Jacobson and Kodey Howard. I'm gonna go out on a limb here with little to no evidence of this being fact, but I'm gonna guess that most courtroom judges aren't starting off their day expecting to have to run around chasing delinquents down a flight of stairs. Well, whether Judge Buzzard saw it coming or not, this is exactly what his day entailed. When 2 young men, Tanner Jacobson and Kodey Howard, came into his courtroom on October 16th, 2018. The 2 men made a run for it straight out of the courtroom, still in their handcuffs, and the judge quickly shed his robe and bolted right after them, chasing them down 4 flights of stairs, all the while yelling, "Stop, stop, you're only making this worse." But still they continued. Buzzard only managed to catch Howard, but Jacobson didn't make it much further before being caught by authorities after just a few blocks outside. They should have listened to the judge, because they did indeed make it much worse. Next up at number 6, Leonid Gracier. In 2019, Leonid was convicted for killing his younger sister, and upon his arrest told authorities Satan had demanded him. Well, it wouldn't be the first time we've heard that excuse. Seemingly unfazed by what he had committed, he was put into custody in Moscow, where apparently it's common to put prisoners into these boxes to detain them. Perhaps what they seemed to forget was handcuffs, however, as the killer tried to escape the confines by crawling up into the ceiling of the courthouse. He was nearly successful, but didn't manage to get very far before police tased him and pulled him back down from the ceiling. During his confession, he said he didn't regret his actions and essentially that he stood by his crimes and said that he had made everything better in doing them. So while he didn't technically succeed in his escape, I think we can all agree that we're glad that's the case. Coming in at number 5, a helping hand. Like most things in life, things are easier with the help of your friends. But But unfortunately in this case, Callum was a 21-year-old helping his teenage friend escape a 5-month jail sentence. At first, the teen was just convicted for stealing a cell phone and for whatever reason decided his best option was to make a break for it. Bailiffs went after him but weren't actually too worried at first, as the door to exit required someone to push a button on the other side of it for it to open. Well, little did they know he had someone to do that very job. The accomplice, Callum Finter, ended up also being arrested for helping the teen escape, but he tried to claim that it was a total accident and he didn't mean to push the button. I don't know, but it seems pretty intentional to me looking at the footage there. This story didn't seem to win over anyone, and he was ultimately sentenced to 3 months in jail for aiding his friend in his escape. The teen was on the run for 2 days but was later found and ended up having another 6 months added to his sentence. Have you ever heard the saying, "Not all help is good help"? Just saying, it might have been something to think about before getting caught up in all this mess. Next up at number 4, Quantrell Schwartzlo. This piece of work was under arrest for some brutal domestic violence, and despite that, was still left alone. Now, I don't know what it is about leaving criminals alone for a minute, especially those that are committed for some serious and dangerous crimes, but it just seems to me like once they are in custody, they should be continuously observed. Well, as you guessed it, Quantrell should have been kept under a closer watch. Though he was handcuffed, that didn't seem to stop him from escaping out of a window in an interrogation room in what can only be described as a swan dive out of the building. How he managed it, I don't quite understand. How he didn't break every bone in his body on the way down, also a mystery. But luckily he was caught about 3 hours later hiding out at a friend's house and was eventually charged, not only for his escape, but also the unruly crimes he committed on his girlfriend. Next up at number 3, Christopher Lee Ruffin. Back in 2012, while appearing in court for a probation violation, Christopher was sentenced to another 90 days in jail. Now, I don't know what he was originally charged for or any of the details of his case, but all in all, 90 days doesn't seem like it's as bad as it could get. But apparently it was still too much for Christopher. His runaway is especially wild to me because it's not just that he managed to escape, but he was actually tased by 2 of the bailiffs and still managed to continue running while being tased. He then ran past security and straight out the front door. In the next few hours, he tried to get multiple rides, threatening strangers to drive him out of town, but the police ended up catching up to him and took him back to jail. Now, this is just a wild guess, but I have a feeling he was looking at more than 90 days after the shenanigans he pulled. Coming in at number 2, Deontay Reciles. In 2014, this convict was arrested for the burglary and killing of a woman named Jill Sue, for which he claimed he was being framed. Well, as he puts it, to prove his innocence, he decided to escape the courthouse with the help of some other inmates and his girlfriend. And I mean really, what says innocent more than a secret inmate collab and a getaway car? It seems like his accomplice helped to remove his handcuffs, and then he had some twin brothers distract a guard and give him a signal for when to make a run for it. He then slipped out of a fire exit and ran to the getaway car where his girlfriend had a change of clothes for him, and they drove off in a flash. This was a very high profile case considering what he was on trial for, and caused a huge manhunt across Florida, with SWAT teams and helicopters roaming the city all hours of the day. He was missing for a week, but thankfully was found. Now back in custody, he faces a potential life sentence with the death penalty for his crimes, although he still maintains his innocence in the entire ordeal. And last up in our number 1 spot, Ted Bundy. Ah yes, the notorious and downright evil killer who needs no introduction. But despite being convicted of killing and committing other horrors to at least 30 women, he was granted way more independence than should have been allowed to someone of his security level. People felt he was very charming and seemed to conveniently forget what he was in custody for. Well, Bundy took advantage of that, and in June of 1977, while on trial for one of his many killings, he was left alone in a courtroom library to prepare, as he was representing himself in court. While alone and out of sight from the guards, Bundy managed to open a window and make a run for it. He jumped out of the 2nd-story window, injuring his ankle, and managed to disappear into the woods for 6 days. He was, of course, found, convicted, and eventually sentenced to death for all of his crimes, but it's one of the craziest escape stories to this day. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. I'm Kennedy. If you liked this video, make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.